Dave 3. Hey, Christoph, Laurie, Kling Music, Boglin Music. That's Blair, isn't it? Paul, Robert, Bart, one of my masterminders. Welcome. Harry, where are you all? I don't know what to say. Calling in from. Oh, my chat display thing isn't working. That's weird. Oh well, let's get rid of it. There we go. Okay, I'll have to look into that. I wonder why that is. Anyway, so Laurie's from West Cork. Robert's from London. Hey Rich. Hey Info. Right, so Mikhail, West Coast. West Coast of where? West Coast. Dublin from Info. Toxin. Alex, Liverpool. Brilliant. Samuel, Spain. Granada. Beautiful place, Granada. Blair, Devon. Less splurge for me today, but more template construction. Ooh, sounds ominous. Not sure about that. Anyway, let's go. And actually, first of all, does anyone have any questions? Maurizio from Italy, hello. Hi, Mike. Yeah, does anyone have any questions? Bart's from Amsterdam. Helender's from Oslo. Brilliant. So I'm going to start. So we're doing today. We are doing the strengths splurge, and the directions in the strengths splurge are to find things that you recognise as musical strengths and kind of make splurges which de-emphasise your weaknesses and focus on what you would describe as your strengths. Now, if you're, let's take the most extreme example of somebody who might struggle to even think about that. Somebody who's never made music before and who's just starting out as a beginner. Okay, now obviously you have to have tried to do something in order to know what your musical strengths are. But let's say you've done a couple of days of splurging, and you've noticed that there is a particular thing that you look forward to doing, or that you like doing, or that you can, or that kind of came out relatively easy, or that that takes you a shorter amount of time. In the definition of strength that I am using, that is a strength because you're comparing yourself to yourself, and this is something that I think few people do, or it's not exactly few people do. No, it is that few people do, is that they don't compare themselves to themselves. They compare themselves to others. Now, comparison to others is a funny thing. In, I would say, minority of cases, it can motivate people, but only if you've got a healthy creative process already. Only if you're making progress already. I think in the majority of cases, comparing yourself to others, while it can be instructive, I'm not saying it can't be instructive, while it can be instructive, actually can really hold you back. I've just seen it time and time again. You listen to somebody whose music you love, and you go, oh, you compare it to yours. You thought you were doing quite well, you compare it to yours, and you're like, oh, I'm terrible. What I often say to people who haven't been doing this for a long time is, if you were quite into running, would you compare yourself to Usain Bolt and get demotivated by that? I mean, it would be highly unlikely that you would do that. But people seem to think for some reason that making music is one of these things that you just come out of the womb and you're able to do. It's absolute nonsense. I mean, if anything, if anything, there are kind of, this isn't arguable, but there are more kind of practicable skills involved. I mean, it's a very, very complicated action, making music. Yeah, there's all kinds of different things. Yeah. In some ways, it's less physical, particularly if you're not actually playing things. but it's like it's a very brain based thing. So really, if I think I made a comparison with running, and there are no perfect analogies. If it was a perfect analogy, then it would be the same thing. But essentially, you do not come out of the womb being able to do anything. I've had 4 children. I can verify that the only things that you can do well coming out of the womb are crying and various forms of other bodily functions, and that's about it. You can't even sleep very well usually for a lot of babies. So you will get better by practicing, and how you get better by practicing, how you maintain the motivation to practice, is by comparing yourself to yourself, not so much comparing yourself to others. Okay, when I say comparing yourself to yourself, compare yourself today with you yesterday, or in this case, figure out what your individual, how you come into this, because there are different starting points that people come. I'm not saying there is no starting point element to this. Yeah, so we are trying to get a baseline of a starting point. Okay, so we have. Yeah, Laurie's saying it took about 8 years of having studio to get beyond comparison to others. Yeah, it doesn't need to take. It doesn't need to take that long. Just stop. Enjoy other people's music and be inspired by other people's music, but don't avoid comparison, because you don't know. You don't know what they've done to get to where they are. And in all of the cases that I've ever come across, there's been a lot of making music. If, in fact, they do actually write the music themselves, which is a whole other thing. Rich. So Rich is asking me a question which is separate from splurging, and I think I need to keep this about kind of splurging, otherwise it's going to go off in all kinds of directions. But Rich is asking, in your creative process, do you cycle through your modules daily, weekly, or do you find it varies with each track, song? In each module. I don't know what you mean by module, Rick. You're going to have to use the language that I use. I don't think I've used modules. Can you explain what you mean by modules? But in general, attempt to keep the questions around splurging at the moment. Okay. Yeah, so let me know what you mean by modules, and then I will attempt to answer your question as you've asked it. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to start with the DFAM, and I've unplugged it from the DAW because I want to use the DFAM to actually find a tempo. So. And this is something I was just having a little fiddle around before. I just want to check this is time. Make sure it's in. Start with that. What I might do though is slow it down. Right, and then I'm going to get the tempo. So it's wrong. Stop there. Okay. And I started that thing before this, just because I didn't want you to get bored with watching me tweak knobs. So. Maybe I did. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Apologies, Rich. Maybe I could well have done that. It's Rick's saying. Richard. Sorry, not Rick. Rich is saying. Sorry, I thought you used the word module in terms of your creative process. Yeah, in the heat of the moment, I may well have done that. I wouldn't have done it on a video. Yeah, so sections, yes, I modularize the creative process. That's where it comes from. Absolutely, yeah. So I wouldn't. That's totally fair. So my mistake. Apologies. Okay. That's a very, very big question. What I would say is wait. So the question was, let's go back to the question so that everyone remembers. In your creative process, do you cycle through your modules daily, weekly, or do you find it varies with each track, song? So I'm not cycling through the modules. I'm cycling through the, so I'm not cycling through the sections. I'm cycling through the tracks. So there isn't really it's not, you're cycling through the, does that make sense? So there are different tracks in different, I'm going to stop calling them modules because it's doing my head in, and that's not what I call them. What do I call them? In fact, let me start calling them modules. There you go. Okay. So we've got splurge, discover, draft, done, release. Okay. And there are, in the automatic music machine, there are different tracks at different points in that process. Right. This is a very, very basic overview. There's a video at the end of the Idea Explosion challenge, which gives you an overview of the automatic music machine. It's way, way more involved than it's way more kind of. There is way more to it because I can't do it in the course of a 20-minute video. But this is the basic idea. So there are different pieces of music at different stages. Let's call them stages. There you go. Stages in the creative process. And what it is basically, I mean, you're always splurging, yeah. So you're always kind of filling the tank, yeah. And and there's another one. There's a sketchbook column as well, which is you'll get to that. And then you essentially cycle through the tracks that you can work on in the following week. So you figure out how many slots you have available in the automatic music machine, and then you cycle through them. And in the Leap, which is the training where I do the automatic music machine, I get people just to focus on sort of 2 stages at a time in any given week, but you don't have to do that. That's just what I do to kind of make it simpler for people to understand. So you're not really cycling between modules. You're cycling between tracks in the modules, if that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I encourage people at first anyway to do shorter sessions than you're used to. So that, yeah, I encourage people to do shorter sessions so that they can cycle through more. You don't have to do short sessions, but what I have found is that it tends to be, with longer and longer and longer sessions, it tends to be diminishing returns. You're in greater danger of messing yourself up and making mistakes. So I do encourage people to do that. Right, so let's plug in the where are we? Yeah, okay. I think that's it. With this thing, you've got to move it along to the last step, so should work. Maybe we'll go a bit faster than that. Let's go 98. Hello, David. Yes, of course. How dare you eat dinner instead of watch me? Brain food. Right, here we go. Let's record this. It's a DFAM. Ew. It's a Moog DFAM. One of my favourite ever purchases. Literally ever. Oh, my goodness me. Michael, Monday. Let's do that again, shall we? I always do that. I always get selected on the wrong track. And then forget that I've got to reselect the other track. Right, let's start again. Yes, so I think it's Trevor is saying, can I share the code? Yes, share the code. You can share the code for the I Do Explosion Challenge Program coupon. Bear in mind that when or if I actually use this, take this piece of music forward, if it does actually end up sounding like a piece of music and not just a complete nightmarish mess, that I'm not necessarily going to use this file, this audio file, as the whole thing. Yeah. So if I make mistakes or things that don't work at that particular section or anything, it doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want with it. I can even just record another one. I mean, this hasn't got presets. There's no way of saving presets or anything. The best I can do is take a photo, but it just doesn't matter because it's a starting point. Everything is a starting point. So. Robert says you can stick it on Beatport if it's bad. There you go. Oh dear, that's funny. Is the DFAM running through any processing? Sounds amazing. No. That's one of the reasons I love it. I mean, it is running through processing in a sense because there's processing in it, but not any external out of the DFAM processing. It's just going straight into, you're hearing the raw signal through the sound card. Is with it. It's very hard to know where to stop. I mean, this is already getting way too long, so I'm just going to stop now. You could go on forever, and you often do. That is a danger. Right. So, did I do any coach training courses? Do you mean as a coach? Did I train as a coach? Is that what you're asking? If that is what you're asking, then yes, I did. I did 2 courses. I did where they were kind of in-person courses with the Coaching Academy in the UK. I did a diploma and a thing, just another thing put on by them. So. Yeah, so coaching is a thing. Coaching is a thing in itself. I don't know whether you've seen those masterclass things. I'm sure you have. What you will notice in that is that people who are good at things aren't necessarily the best coaches. I mean, it's still valuable, but if you want, it's like just because you're good at making music doesn't make you a good teacher, right? Or a good coach. And I would say a coach is different to a teacher anyway, but that's a totally different matter. So that's one of the things people forget. It's like, it's like it's a really famous person who's really, really, really successful. Right, I'm going to learn from them. And then it's like, how much did you actually learn? I mean, sometimes it can be a bit more like watching a documentary than it can actually getting training. So, coaching is a thing in itself. So I was talking yesterday about good teachers, and, there's the thing that you are teaching. Yep. So, for instance, in this case, the creative process, how to build, how to maintain a creative process. And then there is the skill of actually teaching and coaching. And they're two different things. So if you want a really, really good teacher, that teacher or coach will have expertise in both. So that's important to bear in mind. Trevor, sorry, I will get back to you on our Slack community, the Leap Slack community about that question. Sorry, I haven't so far. Just bumped me on community. I can't be thinking of things like that right now. Got enough on my mind. He was asking me, are there any books I can recommend about coaching? Yes, so that's right. Sorry, I missed that question, Alex. Alex said, any tips for getting better with improvisation on the piano keys? I can play some chords and scales, but not much else. Just do it. Ears. Another thing that is really helpful is another thing that can be really helpful is just playing along with things that you like. Yep. And it's going to sound terrible at first, but what you need to get used to is it's like a connection between your ears and your hands. And I mean, I'm not very good at improvisation on the piano. I wish I was a lot better. I make mistakes all the time, but I'm practicing to do that. But play along with already existing things, like just pieces of music, and just play stuff over the top. Another thing to do is just every day, just have like 10 minutes where you just play. I don't know anything, using those chords and scales. So I mean, if you can play scales. I mean, this is C major, right? It's just, there aren't any black keys, yeah? And that is me improvising something that doesn't sound, I mean, it's very, very basic, very, very simple. But did you know what? Listen to some of the kind of most iconic melodies, pieces of music, and you will find that they are extremely simple. So just take C major and just maybe even just 2 fingers. Everybody sleep. So So, yeah, it's really, if you can play a scale, any scale, and C major is a good one to start with because it's just the white notes, which starts on a C. Yeah, and if you can play that on both hands. Yeah, and I know like C major isn't necessarily something that you would hear in like very often in like banging techno or a lot of house or a lot of anything, but it doesn't matter. It's kind of about improvisation. Start there. If you want actually thinking about it, if you want to have a minor key, then just you do A minor, because A minor is basically they're basically the same as C major. So yeah, see, look, I mean, I'm getting it wrong with just two hands, but it doesn't matter if you get it wrong. Yeah, just start by doing that, and what you will start to notice over time is that you start hearing things, and when I say hearing things in your head. Yeah, so now I can hear, and I know it goes. Yeah, so I'm starting to be able to, because I've been doing it a while, pick out both notes coming into my head and I'm able to pick them out on the keyboard. And all that is just practice and just doing it over and over again. Okay, so like that. Yeah, I mean, people. So I'm giving you the instructions for getting better at improvising without having to know any music theory aside from the scales you already know. Right? Because I mean, you can. I'm kind of giving you almost like because you can go like the music theory thing. It's a whole thing in itself, and what I do find is it can distract from the practice of actually using your ears. There's a method of learning instruments called the Suzuki method, where you basically, I mean, it's a lot more involved in this, but basically you just use your ears. And, if you want to get better as quickly as possible, my direction is to use your ears, just start playing on one scale. Yeah, so A minor or C major is the most obvious if you know how to play those scales, and just start playing, because it's like I did it, like in order to learn English, I didn't try and teach my 2-year-old child or 18-month-old child. This is a noun and this is a verb, and what you must do, I mean, it's like that's not how I did it. They picked it up, right? And I think we do overemphasize the theoretical side, but the theoretical side is divorced. I mean, somebody even said in the chat, I'm terrible at playing, but I know music theory. So you can be great at playing without knowing music theory. There are a lot of musicians who would do that. And how do they do that? By playing. You don't need to know music theory in order to be a great improviser. You don't need to know the theory. You need to know the practice. You need to do the practice. Okay? So that's a really, really important distinction. And we overemphasize because we're so information-based. I need information. I need to watch a video so that I can be certain that this is right. Yeah, all that. Just put that aside and do practice. Use your ears. Develop your ears. Yeah, play along with stuff. Find out what key it's in. I mean, if it's in a really difficult key, then maybe try something else. But find out what key it's in and just play along to it. So anyway, where am I? I keep on getting sidetracked here. Well, not sidetracked really, because answering your questions is probably the most important thing. So I think we remember this was Now, you can hear there are a few wrong notes in there. I'm not going to worry too much about them at this stage. Oops. Okay. Yes, I seem to be getting my John Hopkins on slightly with this one, aren't I? Anyway, not doing that on purpose. This is a really good example of how the instruments that you choose kind of automatically create something. Yeah. Now, so there's two things playing here. There's a Moog machine, yeah, the drum synth, and a piano, and it's automatically putting the music into a certain space. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that I need to take this on and then write a John Hopkins like piece of music at all, but kind of there's already a starting point of a kind of area that I'm into, and that's just happened by the instruments that I've chosen. One of the problems with all of this stuff and DAWs in general, or if you've got a studio like full 5,000 synthesizers, is that you just end up going and if you think about it, the more different options you have for sounds and this, that, and the other, in a sense, the more not like anything your music can be. If your music can be anything, because you've got all of these options, then it's not going to be anything. It's just going to be, this isn't true, but the way I kind of think about it is that if you had all of the equipment in the world, yeah, and you had all of the skills in the world, yeah, and you used all of them, then you would literally write the world's greatest lift music. do you know what I mean? It would be so vanilla that it wouldn't be anything. It would just be like, right? We got this idea that I want to be a well-rounded producer. I want to be able to do everything really, really well. Thing is, I think that a well-rounded producer would literally just write the world's most vanilla music. I want to be a spiky producer that just is really good at that and not so good at that, because that is where the unique sound will come from. That's where the meanness will come from. That's where the you-ness will come from. So, anyway. So let me ask you a question while I'm just putting this next part in. What has been your biggest... I asked this question yesterday and there were lots of answers to it. But since you've been continuing to splurge, what have been your biggest problems with splurging? Like, what are the biggest... it can be a mental obstacle, but it could also be a... like a kind of process obstacle. Yes, my voice is. It could be a so a mental obstacle, psychological obstacle, maybe even just a sitting down to write obstacle, any obstacle at all. Shall I use this again? No, let's find another one. Let's just find another sound. How about that? Ooh. Scary. No. Frightening. Horror. Interesting. Let's give that a go. Cling. Worrying about mistakes. Why would you worry about mistakes? Can you just tell me, Cling, what's the reason you're worried about your mistakes? Because that's an interesting This is one of the things I learned from coaching. You can tell a lot from the words people use. So why are you worried about your mistakes? Okay. Yeah, I think that might be too... So, Kling, I really, really want you to answer this question. Why are you worried about your mistakes? Tell me why you're worried about them. Okay. If I mess up the rhythm... Yeah. Okay, so yeah, if I mess up the rhythm, do I just leave it? I know that's the question you're asking, and I'm answering your question, which is very frustrating, I know, with another question, right? But this is how I'm going to answer your question, by finding something out, okay? So this is the difference between teaching and coaching. So in coaching, you ask a lot of questions. I ask a lot of questions, right? So Kling says, if I mess up the rhythm, do I just leave it? Worried? I don't know why, really. I just want to get it right. Okay. Of course, we all just want to get it right. So the question so you just want to get it right. What would happen? What would you do if you came back to a piece of music, Kling, and you then said, oh, that's wrong. What would you do next? But you still wanted to work on that piece of music because you heard another good idea, even though there were mistakes in it. What would you do next? I just want to get it right, because they won't be usable and will waste time. Okay, so let's just go into that. So just answer the there's a bit of a delay here, so I get that. So let's just say there's a mistake in there, yeah, and when you listen back, yes, you hear there's a mistake in there, but you hear also that there's a good idea in there. What would you then do in the next session? And I'm going to carry on finding this thing. So try it out. So if presumably, right, let's say you make a mistake, yeah, and you just leave it in, yeah, at this stage, yeah, then you listen to all of your splurges, yeah, and there's this one splurge which has a couple of mistakes in it, yeah, but you can still hear that you're still really excited about the idea. Presumably what you would do in the next session, right, is you would fix the error. Yep. I'm guessing. So what is the reason you're worried about a mistake if you can fix it? And what is the reason you have to fix it now? So this is an interesting point and an important point. There are certain mistakes which will eclipse the good idea. And I think this is something that I really want you to start thinking about, is that we have this preference, which is just like, it's almost this need to get everything right now. It explains why a lot of people, even before they've got anything, will start like EQing everything, right? When there isn't anything to EQ. Do you know what I mean? It's like, we're going to need to get this right first, and then we'll add this other bit. The thing is, often what I've found is that mistakes don't actually eclipse a good idea. They display a good idea. Because if it still sounds like a good idea with the mistakes, then it's more likely to be a good idea. If you spend ages making everything sound brilliant and fixing all mistakes at this stage in the process, it's actually much harder to hear what the good ideas are. And then there's another benefit of my approach. And I'm not saying leave all mistakes in, because there are certain mistakes that you probably want to fix at this stage. So this is the thing that you're kind of working out, yeah, in the splurging, with the direction, no focus on quality. You're figuring out how far to push this, because I talked yesterday about the chimp, yeah. The most extreme example of splurging would just be just going boom, 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 and doing nothing else, right? But this is part of it. One thing I have found about mistakes is that often in the moment of creation, I perceive them as being mistakes, and actually when I leave them, much more than I have done before, they actually end up turning into the starts of the best ideas I have. There's this one particular piece of music I'm working on at the moment. I'm just finishing it up, and it ends on a wrong note, right? So it's all in I think it's C minor. Oh, hang on, it's not going to work, is it? So it's all in C minor. I don't think it's C minor, but let's just say it's all in C minor. Yeah. And the last note I played accidentally was and it's actually a really big moment in the track, because it actually led me on to a kind of second half of the track, which is turned into a different track. But anyway, it ends on this kind of and it's such a kind of, when I say genius, I'm not talking myself as a genius, but it's such a genius moment, but it came out of a mistake. Okay? So I don't, you don't need to worry about your mistakes, because your mistakes can be fixed at any point. Doesn't need to be now. Yeah. Often mistakes will actually highlight what a good idea is, because if it still sounds like a good idea with the mistakes in, it's more likely to be a good idea. And often mistakes can be the starting points of something you never would have thought of, something much better. When you get, I don't know if you've had that experience, I do have it all the time, when I listen to some great, artists' music, and I'm like, God, how did they think of that? How did they think of that? I never would have thought of that. What do I need to learn? And from my experience of working with lots and lots of, very, very great musicians, is probably they didn't think of it. Probably they noticed it, right? Something happened and they went, ooh, they made a mistake and they went, ooh, now there's an idea. Okay. So, what am I doing? Yes, right, Omnisphere. That'll do. Let's just use that. So, I tell you what, also, Kling, and I hope you don't mind if I call you Kling, it's just easier than Kling music. So, I know I've made some mistakes in here. Yeah, and I've left them in. So let's just do an experiment when you're listening and see what kind of impact those mistakes have on your opinion of music. And it doesn't matter whether you hate the music or not, but it's see if you can notice the difference between what the idea is and the mistakes. Yeah, because they're actually two different things. You can kind of separate them in your mind. And that's what I mean by hearing past the mistakes. One of the best skills that you can develop as a music producer is to hear past things not being right. To actually, okay, so if I sorted this out in the future, would this be good? Because the other benefit of doing this, of hearing past mistakes, hearing past things not sounding good, hearing past things not being produced properly, is that you save a lot of time. Because if you have to fix everything in order to decide whether you want to work on this or whether you want to finish this, then you're going to spend most of your time fixing things that aren't worth fixing. Yeah. So. was a mistake there. There have been 2 mistakes I've heard so far, aside from admitting mistakes. Okay. Again, another mistake here is, let's do a bit of theory. How about that? Right. No, that's the wrong one. Why isn't it displaying this? There we go. So I forgot that it was in the F major, and F major has an A natural. So F major is F. The triad of F major is, probably better if I do it on the piano. Hang on, let's go back to here. Not that. Up to here. Yeah, so the triad of F major is F, F, A, and C. Okay. And I forgot that it was F major. I remember it was F, and I thought it was F minor. So I played an A flat. So here you can see this one here is an A flat. Yep. So, but it happens before the piano part comes in, which establishes the F majorness. Okay. So I'm going to leave that mistake in because it might be, it might not be, I don't know. At some point in the future, I might think, well, actually, it would be really cool to suggest F minor, right, before the piano comes in. And then, when the piano comes in, for it to be like the clouds parting and the sunlight flowing onto my face and my bald head, making my shiny bald head shine like the sun itself. So it goes, the track's like, ooh, and then it goes. Yep, so that might be a nice from one thing to another. Might be, might not be. Now, I wouldn't have had that idea had I not made that mistake. So right there, you've got an example of how a mistake can lead to an idea that could be a really good thing. So, okay, so good question from Lucas, thank you. Hello, Richard. The mistakes don't matter. No, they don't. They can be, they're fuel. Yeah, I mean, of course, when you say mistakes don't matter, yes, you are free to fix them, but they aren't, but you don't need to fix them now, and there are benefits to doing that. Sometimes you might want to fix them now because they're just eclipsing everything. It's just like, they're just like, but more often than not, that they're not that, if you can start to hear past them. Okay. So Lucas is saying, I do also struggle to decide what idea to run with. So Lucas, I can see you're browsing different presets, so there is some degree of selectivity to it, but it's hard to judge what's too much. So you're going to enjoy, maybe enjoy is the wrong word, but you're going to get a lot of value from splurge number 3, Lucas, in terms of the preset thing. I won't give the game away. So splurge number 2 is day 3 and 4. Splurge number 3 starts on day 5, because that's a particular type of splurge, which, we'll kind of uncover that. So let's just not talk about presets for now. So, for instance, with this Omnisphere sound, I started with something and I wanted to actually use it, but what the problem was with the sound was that it was just really, really long, and I was actually thinking about the live stream itself, and I didn't want, it was like really long before anything happened, so it was like one of these kind of sounds. Oh. One of them, right? And I was like, this actually for the live stream situation isn't going to isn't going to be very good because it's going to take ages to actually play something in. So I decided to try, all I was looking for was a sound that was quicker. Yeah, that actually, it had more attack to it. Yeah, so that was the only reason that I was finding another sound in this case. Okay, and but in terms of, so that's what I was doing there. And I mean, really, there wasn't an enormous amount of thought. It was just something, just anything, really. Okay. In terms of the ideas, what you will notice is I'm pretty much going with almost the first thing that comes out. It's not always the case, but I'm not really thinking about it too much. So I think if I actually kind of try and uncover how I decide what idea to go with, yeah. Number one, there are times when something will happen, and it doesn't have to be me playing, it can be me like drawing things or whatever, right? Although I don't tend to do a lot of drawing just because I just don't, because I don't have to. And by the way, if you do a lot of drawing in things, you can do splurging just as well as if you're playing them in. But what I would recommend is you don't have to get a piano keyboard, just get a pad controller of some kind and start playing some things in and start practicing. They're going to sound terrible at first, but you will have a different way of interacting with the music that will be helpful to you. Okay, just get it's just cheap, like one of them Korg things or whatever. It's just something that you can actually sort of play stuff, because you'll have it's more of a physical kind of interaction with the music, which I think you'll find really helpful. But anyway, I'm getting off track. In terms of finding the ideas, there are times when I will play something or something will happen and I'm immediately excited by it. Right? That is an experience that I have, and it's a pleasant experience. I like having that experience, but that isn't what I'm searching for. That isn't what I need to move forward at all, in any way, shape. I mean, in fact, that's a fairly rare experience for me. All I need is something. Okay? And if I have been, and what does something mean, right? So if I've been playing around for a few minutes, like I'm talking about 3 minutes or like that, and something hasn't happened, there's like I've trained myself to go in my brain, it's like, okay, enough. I'm going to record whatever the next thing that I play is. Right? That's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to use. Yeah. So there isn't actually really any comparison between the things that I'm playing. I'm not like, is this better than that? Better than this? Better than that? Because one of the things I've noticed is like when you try something and then you try and change it and then you change it again and then you change it, like how many versions back can you actually compare? You can't. Like, how could you? I mean, you can only just compare what you played before with what you're playing now. Even then you can't really. If you recorded every single one and then tried to compare them, even that would be a nightmare. So it's like I'm not really choosing between ideas. I think maybe from your question, Lucas, I struggled to decide what idea to run with. That sounds like you're thinking of it as a kind of, I've got all of these different ideas and I need to select one. That's not how it works. That's not how our minds kind of do things, because we can't remember the third idea previous. Yeah, and we definitely won't be able to, even if we could, we can't really compare it. So just go with something, and that something then puts you into a different set of conditions where you go with you add something else, or you go into the next part, or you do something else, and that will give you another idea. There isn't like you're not sort of choosing and comparing, you're just moving forward through the process. Okay. So Mikhail is asking, what about when you get a clear idea about what to do with what you played? What are the dangers, benefits you feel about reshaping this right there in the splurge? Okay, that's a good question. So Mikhail is one of my Leap members. He's a leaper, and he's asking a very good question. I think, Mikhail, you've done the Leap loads of times, haven't you? My kind of process with the splurge is that I will, as you've probably noticed, I will defer my default. Okay, here we go. My default position with splurging is not to reshape anything while I'm splurging. It's just outwards. Yeah, there's not any kind of. The only time that is not the case is when it's almost like I'm not even reshaping it. It's happening to me. I don't know whether you've had that experience where you're almost like, it feels like you are not the creator. You are simply almost like a witness of this stuff being created through you. If you've ever had that experience, it's flow, right? And so that's a separate thing. So sometimes if I get into that sort of state, that's a different thing. So I'm just going to leave that to one side because I just want to recognize that is something that happens. But in all other cases, and that's a fairly rare occurrence, the more that you splurge, the more it does actually happen because you've got more opportunities and you kind of get practiced at it. But aside from that experience, I just don't reshape things in the moment, because it might not be. I mean, I guess if I had a clear idea or I was really excited to do something, then yes, I would probably do it. But if it just didn't work, or I just wasn't, I kind of got lost with it, it doesn't matter. I kind of let it go. I mean, the dangers are that you stop splurging, of course, and that you end up attempting to you waste time, because people often talk about wasting time. I mean, what is a bigger waste of time than trying to make something good that isn't good? Yeah, like trying to if you've got a bad idea, yeah, that is just not very good, yeah, and it's going to take a lot to make it good, yeah. What's a bigger waste of time than doing that? Is that a bigger waste of time, or is making another 10 ideas, one of which is more likely to be way better? Is that more of a waste of time? I can tell you from experience which one I know is more of a waste of time. And the important thing here is that, as you know, Mikhail, because you've been doing my trading a long time, my coaching a long time, is that when we are in the moment of creation, we are not in the best position to judge what we are creating. That is a simple fact. We're, like, by definition, not in any way objective. We are almost like subject. We are the subject. Yeah, we can't. It's very, very hard to stand outside of that. So if you take that understanding that we can't actually judge whether this idea is good or bad in the moment of creation, yeah, or at least we're in the worst position to judge it in the moment of creation, then the only rational, logical thing to do, unless you're in flow, which is a different thing altogether, yeah, is to not reshape and change things, because you might be wasting time. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I think about that. I mean, the benefits are, I guess, the benefits could be that along the process of reshaping it, you'll come up with another better idea. And if you can maintain that kind of interplay between design and discovery, and I'll talk more about that in the program if you haven't got to it yet in the Idea Explosion program, then it's okay. But I think particularly for people who are splurging for the first time, it's kind of, that's getting onto the more, it's kind of, that takes, I think, a deal of training to get to be able to do that, because most people are kind of very like perfectionist and like stuck in this like, it has to be right now, and oh god, if I don't get it right now, then I'm a failure type mindset, and we're kind of releasing that. And the other thing to say about that, there is a belief, there is an idea, and it comes from the finishing one track, finishing another track, finishing, pummeling each track into submission kind of process that all, I had to do it for years because we didn't have the ability to recall pieces of music that we were working on and stuff. But from that process of finishing music by like one track, then another track, then another track, you develop this assumption that you have to strike while the iron's hot with every idea. And if you don't act on that now, then it's gone. It's like the idea's gone. It's never going to come back. What I've realized is that is absolutely false. It's just not true at all. A good idea remains a good idea. What changes is you. Yeah, you sometimes know what to do and sometimes you don't. And in the context of an automatic music machine where you're working on multiple tracks at the same time, it just no longer matters. So you can just release the need to get it right now and kind of relax and flow through the process without, just letting go of all that, I've got to get it right now, and come back to things. And sometimes you'll have a great session, and things will progress and you'll know what you're doing. Sometimes you won't, but it doesn't matter. So, hey Juan. So here's the A flat. So I think what I'm going to do, so remember with the strength splurge, with the strength splurge, I only asked you to do 3 instruments, but I did say this is just a starting point. So remember, I actually selected a particular type of sound here, which I decided not to go with at that point, right? But what I'm going to do now is I am actually going to go with that. I'm going to use a sound like that now. There was a mistake there, but I don't need to fix it right now. I think what I'm going to do, just be very, very simple and copy that over like that. And let's just play this new part over here, and then I'm going to call this splurge done, I think. It's quite a long one, isn't it? Anyway, so let's just go from here. Another thing I just wanted to point out here, and this is more of a musical thing, right? And this might help you, Lucas, with the I don't know what idea to go with. Okay, so one thing that I am doing to decide on, well, not decide, but to find an idea. It's not, I'm not really thinking it, but right. So can you hear in this defam? So this is what I mean about an idea comes from an idea, comes from an idea, comes from an idea. So if you can hear in this defam part, right? So what can you hear there? What's the defining thing that's going on there? The motif, if you like, is yeah. Now, where that's coming from is random. I mean, you probably can't see this. Am I going to attempt to move that camera? Yeah, I will. Oh, prepare for massive disasters to ensue. Right. Right. So, can you see that? Right. So you see this row of knobs here? Yep. This is the pitch. So this is a sequencer. Yeah. These are the pitch knobs and these are the velocity knobs. Now, when I twist one of these knobs, very, very, very small amount, it changes a whole note. So it's a very, very wide kind of thing. So you have to be like, even if you just go nudge it a tiny amount, it will change like a whole tone. Yeah. So this is where the notes are coming from, and I've got the second VCO because it's basically got two sound sources, VCO1 and VCO2, and I've got the second VCO on this switch. It says VCO2 sequence pitch mod. So in other words, this pitch, these pitch knobs here are only affecting the pitch of VCO2. So VCO2 is playing the boop 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 boop, yeah, and VCO1 is playing the bump 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 bump, yeah, thing, okay, which is staying on the same note. So because VCO1 is not being affected by the pitch. Now the reason I'm showing you this is because that bum 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 came by accident. I didn't think of it. I couldn't have thought of it. And this is one of the things I love about the DFAM is that very thing, is that you can't think of things because the pitch, those pitch controls are so fine that it's kind of, it has to be random. It forces mistakes. So in other words, that little motif, which is just two notes, it's just the seventh of F major and F, yeah, came out of just a random process. Okay. So when I first played, so what did I first play? Okay, so I first played the piano after that. So I heard this. So I had this. And I knew that it was, sorry. Yeah. Can you hear me? Like, so that was me just playing it there. No, 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 no. So I was like, oh, I wonder what I can make out of that little motif. Yeah. So this idea, which came out of a random thing, led to this idea. Yeah. So there you go. Also, so that's an idea, which has come out of that idea. But then I was like, well, hang on a minute. How about if I go right? And then I was there, and I was like, okay, well, what else can I do? Yeah. So it was like, it's like an idea avalanche, in fact, which is one of my missions from Make Music Your Life, which is you if you can practice this, there's this thing, and that leads on to another thing, which leads on to another thing, which leads on to another thing. So essentially this led to me playing that first thing there, which then led to the actual thing that I ended up playing. And when that started, I was away. Okay. And then this part was essentially, I think I might even do the same thing again. Do I? Yeah, here. Yeah. So now this motif is starting to sound like what I call a bit of a thing. Yeah, it's kind of, it's pointing at something, and I'm keeping that in mind when I'm coming up with other ideas, so that everything kind of ties together. Okay, so I'm just going to do now, because I've got 15 minutes before I have a quarterly review with one of my masterminders. So I'm just going to play this in. Hopefully the computer doesn't wibble. Do you hear that rhythmic mistake there in the piano? Doesn't matter. Right. Capture. I love capture. What was it? I got an email from someone yesterday who'd finished the Idea Explosion Challenge, and it was brilliant because I can't remember who it was. So apologies if whoever it was is watching, but they said that what they got from it was, first of all, a lot of not very good ideas, some good ones too, but what the main thing they got from it was that they'd realised that they were actually, they'd realised a few things. I won't go into what it was, but they'd really realised where they kind of were weak and where they were strong and where they needed practice. And it kind of, what the splurge is, yes, it is a way of coming up with better ideas. It's definitely and a lot of ideas and gaining momentum, and it does get results in terms of, particularly if you go very slow, if you're a perfectionist, and all of that kind of thing. So it does do that, but really the biggest benefit of it is a process benefit. It's like a torch, a very bright torch shining onto what is likely to be the biggest thing holding you back in making music, in terms of your process, in terms of, for instance, with clean music, being worried about mistakes. That right there is, I can't be sure because I haven't actually spoken to you, but I would bet that is one of the biggest obstacles that you want to overcome. And what the splurge is doing is shining a light on that obstacle, and also giving you a method, a way, both a psychological but also in a literal practical way of overcoming it. Because you have to be okay with making mistakes. You have to be okay with not knowing that this is going to work out. You have to be okay with uncertainty. You have to revel in uncertainty. And that involves letting go. That involves not actually making the mistake that this music is an indication that you're a bad person or that you failed. Because what these splurges, what your music is, yes, it is an indication of where you need to improve, right? But that's different from an indication that you failed. It's very different. Because if all of the music that you make is shining a light on where you need to improve, then what do you do next? You improve that thing. Whereas if you try and hide from those mistakes, if you're worried about those mistakes, if you're hiding from them, then you're not going to want to improve that thing. You're going to want to shy away from it. You're going to try and cover it up with, I don't know, another plugin or, another this, that, or the other. Yeah. So this is like, it's almost like I'm stripping you naked. Not literally, of course, metaphorically, in a creative sense, so that you can clearly see who you are, where you're at, and where you can improve. Because that, when you can look at that clearly, when you can look that in the face and go, hooray, I know where I need to improve. Well, then you won't lose the motivation when you know what to do, right? Or when you know where the work needs to be done. So that's going to be my live stream for today. I'm going to save this. Mistakes are your best teacher. No. Coach. So that's what I'm going to call that track. And it's in F. Well, mainly F major. Let's just put that because it could be minor as well for a section, and 98 BPM. So splurge that. Fantastic, Harry. I'm glad that you found it useful. I'm gradually trying to, this is all very new to me, this live streaming, and it's very, this is a whole other thing. There we go. This is a whole other thing. Live streaming, people think of, actually not everyone, but musicians, what I've noticed is a lot of musicians think of live streaming as, not this when they're doing producing, but, performing musicians think of live streaming as either like a gig in front of a webcam or a TV show. And really where live streaming is on its own is in the ability to, it's almost like perform and interact at the same time. It's the closest to a one-to-one experience that, and I'm not really talking about this kind of live streaming now, I'm more talking about musicians who are performing. It's the most closest to a one-to-one experience that an audience member can have with an artist they love. And like kind of taking that insight, which I had a couple of weeks ago when I watched the Little Dragon live stream, I'm kind of trying to figure out how to make it as interactive as possible while also maintaining the kind of momentum through it. And I'm not sure I always get that balance right, but I'm certainly trying to improve, because I really do appreciate and enjoy this kind of thing. So okay, so Laurie's just asking a question. Do you keep a splurge folder for each day, or what's best practice in that sense? I'll tell you what to do with the splurges at the end. At the moment, you can just put them in a folder. Don't keep a folder for each day. there's no need. You don't have to. You can if you want, but you don't have to. I'm going to get you to move them into a folder at the end of the process. So don't worry about it. Okay. So cheers, folks. Yes, the Song Exploder podcast is fantastic, Rich. Cheers, everybody. It's been wonderful as ever to see you on here, to talk about all of these things, and also to make a little bit of music as well. I will be back at the same time tomorrow with another Strength Splurge, and we will see what happens. And all that's left to say is onwards and upwards.